Welcome to Coming Home, Survive and Thrive in Homeschooling. You may recognize the music I choose for this podcast. It's the same every week, and I have no intention of changing it. If you don't recognize it, it comes from Handel's Messiah. It's called He Shall Feed His Flock. Today I'm going to tell you a little of the story behind why I chose that piece. It is extremely important to me because it comes from a time in my life when I was so confused and torn between wanting to do what I felt was right. I should say what we thought was right, because it was my husband and my decision. It was pre-homeschooling, probably by a couple of years. Our older two children were in an independent Christian school. I helped out there a couple of days a week as a donation of time in return for a lowering of fees. Our youngest child, who was only 3 at the time, went to kindy for those 2 days I was at the school. We found ourselves in a situation pressuring us to make decisions for our family we did not want to make. What followed after that was a very heart-breaking time. Sometimes when you make decisions which are not what the people in your peer group do, it often can be that your decisions become their judgments, and of course that wasn't our intention. It was what we felt was right for our family, and so we continued to pursue it. Every time we felt that maybe we were wrong, we would go back, talk and pray, sometimes cry a little, and we would still come out and say, no, this is what we believe is right for our family. The relationship to that story and what it's got to do with the music is that year at Christmas time, we went to hear Handel's Messiah. I could take you to the row and seat where we were seated. I was feeling so conflicted, confused and upset, and was searching for guidance. I was feeling rather desperate actually, as was my husband. I was reading the lyrics at the time, and we got to the part in the performance where the singer started to sing. He shall feed his flock like a shepherd. He shall gather the lambs with his arm and carry them in his bosom, and he shall gently lead those that are with young. It was like the fog cleared and despair just stripped away, and I could see so clearly there was my answer. Gently he shall lead those that are with young. I knew right then that if anybody or any organization or any church did not understand that line, gently he shall lead those that are with young, and if it meant that I was not being gently led because I had young, then that was a very clear answer as to whether I could say yes or no to a directive which was spiritually manipulative and making it sound like it was coming from God himself. Well, here I did have something from God himself, because there it was, and I was not feeling gently led. That night, sitting there, listening to Messiah, my life changed. We knew with certainty what we were and were not going to do, and how we could help learn to judge things that were being asked or demanded of us if we didn't know whether it was the right thing to do or not. A few months later, I had to go to counselling, because I wasn't doing very well at all. The counsellor listened to me and she said, "Oh, this sounds like spiritual abuse. I need to talk to my supervisor." In the end, you'll be happy to know that the situation was resolved. Before you switch off and think, this has got nothing to do with me, can I encourage you to hear this out? Because it turns out the symptoms of any abuse are the same. That really took me by surprise. So things like having someone that is more powerful or stronger than you, or in a powerful or leadership position to tell you what you could or could not do. That can be in a situation like ours. It can be in a business situation, if you think of the hierarchies in a business. It can even be in a family group, and certainly it is in political ideologies. If you do look at some of the progressive ideologies, what do we observe happens to someone when they question policy? Generally, what is going to happen there is if you are questioning beliefs, dogma, or doctrine, you are the person with the problem. You need to be brought back into line. That is one of the clear signs of an abusive situation in any group of people. So what else? There is obviously the dysfunctional use of the person who is in power. There will be other people around who are rescuers or enablers who will back up the person in power, known as dysfunctional rescuing, keeping the victim as a victim. It's a counselling technique called the drama triangle, and was what my counsellor used with me when we were trying to unravel what was going on in our life, which put us both, my husband and I, in the position of feeling trapped and not able to break out of this cycle. There is a functional and dysfunctional version of the drama triangle. Obviously, you need authority and leaders in your life, and part of the confusion, especially in a religious setting, you have the reason given to you that you are supposed to submit to those in authority, and that's it. All ideologies have their own doctrine and the books they treat almost as holy. There is always a high priest or high priestess, more often than not self-appointed. They all have their behaviours that demonstrate to you, them, and everybody else inside your group, as well as those outside your group, that this is the group you belong to. You have to do those things in order to be seen as belonging. And if you don't behave in a certain way, or behave in a way that isn't within their policy, you will be brought back into line. So don't make the mistake that this is just what happens in an abusive church situation. Wherever you get a group of people, you can get a dysfunctional use of power because we're all fallen creatures. Everybody is susceptible to a misuse or abuse of power. One of the outcomes of recognizing what an abusive system or a dysfunctional or inappropriate leadership looks like means you can spot it at 10 paces for the rest of your life, which can be quite helpful because now you know quickly which situations to avoid and when to step back from something. But on the other hand, if you see something but others don't, and they're quite happy to stay within that relationship or group, not recognizing anything as being dysfunctional, well, what can you do? I can say that most organizations won't change if you go and point out the error of their ways. More often than not, you'll need to move on. The verse in the song comes from the book of Isaiah and became a part of me for the rest of my life. In the beginning, it was so big and so meaningful for me that I felt like I had been set free. It's kind of ironic if you're coming from a Christian group, because one of the things Jesus said was that he came that we would be free indeed. And here I was, realizing that for so many years, in a certain way, I had not been free to make all my own faith-based decisions. We had been taught to look to the leadership and they'll tell you what to do. And if you think different from them, well, guess who's got the problem? It's not them. So how else did this affect us? Well, it did mean that now I had something by which how to judge what to do in the future if I was put back into similar situations. I would now take it into a business setting where the boss dealt with me in a bullying way. I didn't really want to do anything about it because I don't like confrontation, I really don't. and I'll avoid it wherever possible, which is handy to keep a victim where she's supposed to be. And I was able to resolve that too. Once you go and look at the drama triangle, you see that there are persecutors or perpetrators, rescuers and victims, and those three positions can change around at any time. So the dysfunctional drama triangle is never broken. The goal of trying to reshape the dysfunctional with a functional drama triangle is one of the sides in that triangle has to be broken. In our case, as the victims, we learned how to become functional victims rather than dysfunctional victims, giving us back control. That's another one of the elements where you can spot an abusive system of any type by asking, who's got control here? If it's just one person that's got control, that's a flag. What the counsellor ended up teaching us was how to take back control in your life. At that time, we were also introduced to a really helpful book called The Subtle Power of Spiritual Abuse. I will put a link in the description area. Even though the book is about 30 years old, the principles are still valid. It's like a handbook for people who recognize they are in that kind of situation. As time goes by, the difficult things you endure in your life can shape you. Like a diamond has to be cut to see the facets of its beauty. It hurt like hell at the time, but what I am now as a result of those experiences, I do not regret. Suddenly I had to be mindful of the way people would look to me for advice or leadership. I got really good at not only with our children, but with other people whom I would speak with, recognizing a drama triangle. I could draw it for them and explain what was going on. And for some people, the light would go on and they'd say, oh gosh, yes, that is exactly what's happening. For our children, right from this time, we understood ourselves and started to reshape the way we thought and behaved. We started to show them how they could recognize a humble and godly leader as opposed to a leader in any situation that had their own purposes more at heart than those they lead. We taught them how not to be a victim. We taught them how to resolve conflict in a way that doesn't make you become the persecutor or perpetrator, and what a dysfunctional rescuer was, and how you can help someone out of a situation where they are trapped. My daughter asked me what I was going to podcast this week. I said, I'm going to tell the story about why we use the music we do in the podcast and how it came from a time in our life when someone who meant well and believed they were right was trying to tell us what to do with our family and children. And her immediate response was, nobody's got the right to tell you what to do with your family. Which was brilliant, because that was exactly what we had taught her and our other children. Nobody has the right to tell you what to do with your family, not even people that you think godly or who are in leadership above you. I am quite convinced that neither she or any other of our grown children will knowingly or willingly be a dysfunctional victim in their lives. All of them are equipped, and if the family that is around them see them getting into a situation where they start to become a bit confused or unsure of what to do, we can go to them and say, hey, can I talk to you about such and such? And help them if they're in a dysfunctional situation to navigate their way out of it and get that part of their life back into control again. I believe that verse of Scripture applies to any parent listening, whether you consider yourself religious or not. If you understand, I hope it helps you to never let yourself get into situations where, when you've got young, you feel pressured or too busy or manipulated or obligated to have to do whatever it is people are wanting you to do. A self-audit at times in your life is a really good idea, and if you are feeling that you are not being gently led, I hope that every time you hear this music on the podcast, you will remember to continually ask yourself, am I being gently led? That you have the courage to look at what needs to be looked at and deal with things that need to be changed. If this podcast has indeed been interesting and helpful to you, please pass it on. There will be others out there who appreciate it just as much as you. Don't forget our website, and I'm available there if anyone needs to contact me for consulting. I will see you all next week. Bye-bye.